The galaxy was a vast and unpredictable place. There were countless worlds, each teeming with their own cultures, dangers, and unknowns. Among all these worlds, one name stood out, a name that echoed through the stars like a thunderclap. Scifi, the hunter of the galaxy. A fierce, untouchable warrior, she was feared by both her enemies and her allies. There were whispers of her skills, how she could track any target across light years, how her bow never missed its mark, how she was capable of eliminating entire fleets with a single strike. She was a legend, an icon of power. But Caleb, a simple human explorer, didn't care about the legends. He wasn't interested in her reputation as a hunter. His mission wasn't to fight her or bring her down. It was something much simpler and much riskier. He had come with a proposal. Caleb's ship drifted quietly in the orbit of a harsh, barren planet, one of many Scifi had used as a training ground in the past. The wind howled outside his vessel, carrying the faintest scent of alien soil. He had studied her for years, her tactics, her moves, even the small moments when she let her guard down. He had learned everything there was to know about her, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before her. The moment Caleb stepped onto the planet's surface, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. It wasn't just the physical harshness of the landscape, barren rocks, deadly heat, and constant storms. It was the mental challenge. He was about to meet a woman who had lived through more battles than most armies. She was the one who had shaped her own destiny in a galaxy filled with chaos. Caleb had spent days navigating the planet's dangerous wilderness to reach the location where Scifi was rumored to be. As he approached the clearing, his heart raced. His mission was simple: find Scifi, propose to her, and hope for the best. He arrived at the clearing just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. The moment his boots hit the ground, the wind stopped. It was as if the very planet held its breath. Standing in the center of the clearing was a figure, tall, imposing, her presence more powerful than any weapon. Scifi's dark armor, worn and battle-tested, gleamed under the setting sun. Her eyes, cold and calculating, turned to meet his gaze. "You've come," she said, her voice calm but laced with the weight of years spent in war. "Most who seek me only wish for a quick death. You're different." Caleb swallowed hard. He had studied everything about her, but standing face to face with her made everything feel more real. The stories he had read about her paled in comparison to the woman who stood before him. "I came for a reason," Caleb said, his voice steady, though his heart thudded loudly in his chest. "Not to fight, not to die, but to ask for your help." Scifi raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but not yet convinced. "Help? I am not in the business of helping humans." "I don't want your help for some mission or cause," Caleb replied, taking the slow step forward. "I want you to be my partner." Her face remained neutral, though the slightest shift in her posture suggested she was calculating the situation. She looked him up and down, as if measuring his every move. "Your partner," she repeated, as if the words themselves were foreign. "Why would a human, of all things, want a woman like me? I'm a hunter. I'm not someone you should be asking to share your life with. You're wasting your time." "I'm not asking for anything else," Caleb said, his voice unwavering. "I've seen what you do, how you fight, how you survive, but I also see something else, something more than just a warrior. You're more than the sum of your battles. And that's what I want, what I need." Scifi's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in curiosity. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. She had always been seen as a weapon, someone who killed without question, without hesitation. But this human wasn't afraid. He wasn't offering her riches or power. He was offering her something different, a chance to be more than just the monster everyone else saw. "You've mistaken me for someone else," she said, her voice now tinged with something softer, something Caleb hadn't expected. "You think I'm like you. That's your mistake." Caleb shook his head. "No, I think you're far more than just a soldier. And I think that's what makes you worthy of being a partner, not just a weapon. Sailori's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, her mind racing. She had no intention of allowing herself to be controlled by anyone, let alone a human. But there was something in Caleb's eyes, something that reminded her of the human qualities she had long buried. Compassion, courage, even hope. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," Sailori said, her voice low and dangerous. "Maybe both." "I'm neither," Caleb replied with a small smile. "I'm just asking for a chance." For the briefest moment, the silence between them stretched out, heavy and uncertain. And then, as if she had made up her mind, Sailori spoke. "Why would you want someone like me?" she asked. "I'm not someone who can be tamed or owned. I don't want love or companionship. I've been a weapon for too long." Caleb smiled again, this time with a sense of quiet certainty. "Because I don't need you to be anything else. I need you to be you." Sailori stared at him, searching his eyes for any sign of deception, but found none. There was no trickery in his words, no desire for fame or power. Just a man, asking for the impossible. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then I'll walk away," Caleb said, his voice soft but resolute. "But I won't stop hoping." Sailori stood still, her eyes locked on Caleb. The silence between them felt thick, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken words hung in the air. She had faced enemies, mercilessly hunted her targets across countless worlds, and survived battles that had left entire armies in ruins. But no one had ever spoken to her like Caleb just had. She was used to being feared, respected, and even admired. But never in all her years had someone approached her with such raw honesty. No lies, no tricks. Just a human asking for something she had never imagined. "Why would you propose to me?" Sailori's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of confusion, almost as if she was trying to make sense of something that didn't fit into the rigid world she had built for herself. "I'm a killer, a hunter. People fear me, and you think that's something you want." She took a slow step forward, her armor glinting in the fading light. "Why would you risk your life, your future, for someone like me?" Caleb took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. Her words stung, but he knew this was his moment to prove that his intentions were real. He had prepared for this, practiced his words, but now that they stood in front of each other, it felt different. He wasn't sure how she would respond, but he had come too far to back down now. "I don't see you as just a hunter," Caleb replied, his voice calm but firm. "I see someone who has been through a lot, someone who's more than the bloodshed they've seen. You might be a hunter, but you're also someone who can choose not to hunt, who can choose something else, like love, like partnership. That's what I see in you." Sailori's eyes flickered for a brief moment, and Caleb could almost see her struggling with the words he had spoken. It was clear she had never been viewed like this before. She had spent so many years building walls, creating a reputation that made others keep their distance. But now, here was a human who was different from the rest. A human who wasn't afraid of her past. "But I'm not like the others," Sailori said, her voice quiet now, almost softer. She had always believed that she was meant to be alone, to never share her life with anyone. After all, who could truly understand the pain and loss she had suffered? Who would want someone like her, with all the darkness that followed her every step? "You don't know what it's like," she continued, more to herself than to Caleb. "I've been alone for so long. Every time I thought someone could love me, they ended up being hurt. Or worse, I had to leave them behind. I'm dangerous, Caleb. I'm not someone you can just live with. I've seen it all. The betrayal, the bloodshed, the emptiness. You're offering something I can't give." Caleb listened quietly, letting her words sink in. He could hear the pain in her voice, the years of loneliness and war that had shaped her into the person standing before him. He could see it in her eyes, the guardedness, the hesitation. But he wasn't going to back down. Not now. "Sailori," Caleb said softly, taking a small step forward, but not too close, respecting her space. I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are. But I'm here because I believe in something more than just your past. I believe in you. All of you. The fighter, the survivor, and yes, the woman who's tired of being alone. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, Caleb saw a crack in her cold exterior. It was just a flicker, but it was enough. Enough for him to see that maybe, just maybe, there was a part of her that wanted the same thing he did, to not be alone. But I'm not human, Scifi said, shaking her head. I'm not like you. I'm made for war. I'm built for it. Caleb smiled softly. We're all built for something, Scifi. Some of us are built for peace. Some of us are built for love. But that doesn't mean we can't find something in between. Something real. She turned away from him, looking out at the distant horizon, her gaze distant and unreadable. The wind howled around them, stirring the dust in the air. She didn't speak for a long time, and Caleb stood silently, giving her the space she needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Scifi spoke again. I've never been loved, Caleb. Not the way you want me to be. And I don't know if I can do this, if I can let someone in. Her voice was quieter now, vulnerable, something Caleb had never expected to hear from the legendary hunter. Caleb took another step, closing the distance between them. He reached out, not to touch her, but to offer his presence, his support. I'm not asking for perfection, Scifi. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I see you, not as a hunter, but as someone who deserves more, someone who deserves love. For the first time, Scifi turned to face him fully. Her gaze was softer now, though still filled with uncertainty. And what if I disappoint you? What if I can't be the person you think I am? Caleb's smile was gentle but unwavering. Then I'll stand by you, no matter what. Because you're worth it. All of you. The words hung between them, and for a moment, Scifi didn't know what to say. She had never been given a choice like this before. But as she looked into Caleb's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in anyone else's. Genuine care, unshaken by her past. Why would you want to take that chance with me? She asked again, her voice barely a whisper. Because, Caleb replied, I believe in you. In us. And I'm not giving up on that. The days that followed were unlike anything Caleb had experienced before. As he walked beside Scifi through the barren wilderness of the planet, the weight of her words lingered in his mind. She had agreed to hear him out, but she hadn't yet given him an answer. In her eyes, it was clear. She needed to see if he was truly ready for the life he was proposing. And so, Scifi had decided on a test. A challenge that would push Caleb to his limits and beyond. You want to be my partner? She asked, her tone colder than usual. Then prove you can survive the same way I have. Caleb knew better than to argue. He had read about the harsh trials Scifi had faced, surviving on hostile worlds and fighting through every danger imaginable. This wasn't going to be easy, but Caleb was determined. If this was the price for her trust, he was willing to pay it. The next morning, Scifi led him into the wilds of the planet's interior, far from the safety of his ship. The terrain was harsh, rocky outcroppings, deep ravines, and thick dust storms that could appear without warning. It was a place where only the strongest could survive. Caleb's heart pounded with every step, but he kept his head high, ready for whatever came next. They didn't speak much during their trek, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Caleb could sense that Scifi was watching him closely, gauging his every move, looking for any sign of weakness. He had expected this. After all, she had spent her entire life surviving on her own, never depending on anyone. Now she needed to know if he could endure what she had. The first test came sooner than Caleb expected. As they reached a narrow canyon, Scifi stopped and pointed ahead. There, perched on the edge of a cliff, was a large, strange creature. Its scales glimmered in the light, and its eyes were a piercing yellow. A predator, one of the many that called this world home. You need to cross that canyon, Scifi said, her voice steady. That creature guards the only path. Deal with it however you see fit." Caleb didn't hesitate. He had faced dangerous situations before, though nothing like this. He watched the creature carefully, noting its movements. It wasn't fast, but it was strong, and the canyon stretched too far to try and go around it. Scifi observed him closely, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't offer any help, no guidance. This was Caleb's test, and he had to find his own way through it. Caleb took a deep breath and, with a quick movement, began to scale the side of the canyon wall. The creature saw him and roared, but Caleb didn't slow down. The path was narrow and treacherous, but he kept his focus. The climb was hard, and his hands ached with the strain, but he kept going, determined to make it to the top. As he reached the highest point, he could feel the creature's eyes on him, but it didn't move. He had outsmarted it, not through strength, but by using his head. When he reached the top, he turned to look down at Scifi, who was still watching him from below. "Is that enough for you?" Caleb asked, a little breathless but proud of his success. Scifi nodded slowly. "You got past it." But that was just the first test. She turned and began walking again, not waiting for Caleb to catch up. The second test came the following day. After a night of little sleep, Caleb found himself deep in a dense forest, the air thick with humidity. He could barely see through the trees, and the sounds of alien creatures echoed through the distance. This time, the test was different. Scifi handed him a small device, a tracker. "You need to find your way to the extraction point," she said. "It's 30 miles from here, through the jungle. There's no map, no compass, just you and your instincts. Don't use the tracker unless you absolutely have to." Caleb took the device, feeling the weight of it in his hand. Scifi was serious. He had to do this himself. If he failed, he'd be left behind. The jungle was a maze of thick vines and massive trees. Caleb stumbled at first, disoriented by the unfamiliar landscape. The heat was unbearable, the air heavy with the smell of earth and plants he couldn't identify. But he pushed forward, remembering the advice Scifi had given him before they started. "Trust your instincts," she had said. "If you don't know where to go, stop and listen. The path is always there, even if it's not obvious." It wasn't easy, and the journey was filled with obstacles. He had to cross streams, avoid dangerous creatures, and climb through thick underbrush. But through it all, Caleb kept going. His body ached, and his mind wanted to give up, but he thought of Scifi. She had survived this world. If she could do it, so could he. Hours later, as the sun began to set, Caleb finally reached the extraction point. It wasn't much, just a small clearing in the jungle, but it was enough. He collapsed to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The tracker beeped, signaling his success. When Scifi arrived shortly after, she didn't speak. She simply stood there, observing him. Caleb wasn't sure what she thought of his performance, but he had done his best. That was all he could give. "Well done," Scifi said at last, her voice unexpectedly soft. She didn't offer praise often, and Caleb knew this was her way of acknowledging his effort. Caleb smiled, even though he felt drained. "Is that it? Or do you have more challenges for me?" Scifi didn't smile back, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of respect, maybe even approval. "You've passed this one, but there's still more to prove." Caleb nodded, ready for whatever came next. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. This was the price for Scifi's trust, and he would do whatever it took to prove he was worthy of it. Caleb had survived the tests. At least he believed he had. Scifi had put him through more than any ordinary human could bear, but he had made it through each challenge, using his mind, his strength, and his will to prove that he could stand beside her. She had led him through her world, the harsh wilderness, the dangers of alien predators, and the unforgiving terrain. And with each step, he had earned something more valuable than just survival. He had earned her attention, and maybe, just maybe, her respect. But Caleb knew the journey wasn't over. Scifi was a woman who had built walls around herself for so long, walls that even the most hardened warriors couldn't break down. If he wanted to prove himself worthy of standing by her side, he had to keep moving forward, keep showing her that he wasn't afraid of the person she had become, or the person she was still hiding from herself. It was late one evening, after they had set up camp in a quiet valley surrounded by towering alien trees, that Scifi finally spoke again. They sat by the fire, the night air cool against their skin, and Caleb found himself wondering if Scifi was ever truly at peace. He had seen glimpses of the woman behind the warrior, someone who carried the weight of 1,000 battles, but who also seemed to carry something else. Loneliness. "I never thought I'd meet a human like you," Scifi said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quieter than usual, less guarded, though there was still an edge to it. She stared into the fire, her expression unreadable. "Most humans are either scared of me or want to take advantage of what I can do. They see me as nothing more than a weapon. But you want something different. Why?" Caleb paused, unsure how to answer. There was so much he could say, but this was Scifi, the hunter of the galaxy, the one who had conquered every enemy and left them trembling in fear. She had survived so much, and now here she was, asking him why he would want her. "Because I see you," Caleb finally said, his voice steady but honest. "I see the person beneath the title. I see someone who's been through a lot, someone who's more than just a killer. I see the pain in your eyes, Scifi. I see that you're not invincible. You're human, just like me." She scoffed softly, shaking her head. "Human? You think I'm like you?" Her laugh was low, bitter, and it sent a chill through the air. "I've killed more beings than you can count, Caleb. I've survived battles that no human could ever imagine. I'm a hunter, a soldier. I'm not like you." Caleb felt a pang of sadness. He had known she carried a heavy burden, but to hear her speak of it so openly was something else entirely. She was more than just a hardened warrior. She was someone who had been shaped by loss and hardship, someone who had been forced to fight for every ounce of survival. "I don't see you as just a hunter," Caleb said, his voice softer now. "I see you as someone who's been carrying this weight alone for too long, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way." Scifi fell silent, her eyes still fixed on the fire. Caleb didn't know what to say next, unsure if his words were reaching her. He had to remind himself that Scifi wasn't used to trust. She wasn't used to opening up to anyone, let alone a human. She had built herself into a fortress, and every time she let her guard down, it must have felt like a personal defeat. "You think you can just walk into my life and change everything?" she finally asked, her voice low but sharp. "You think I'm going to let go of everything I've built?" "I don't want you to let go of who you are," Caleb replied, his eyes meeting hers. "I just want to be part of it. I want to stand beside you, not behind you, not in front of you, but beside you. I'm not asking you to change, Scifi. I'm asking you to trust me." Her eyes softened slightly, though the walls were still there, standing tall and unmoving. "Trust," she repeated, almost as if the word tasted foreign to her. "I've trusted people before, and I've lost them. I can't afford to trust anyone again." "I understand," Caleb said gently, "but you don't have to face everything alone. You don't have to hide from the world or shut yourself off. You don't have to push me away just because you're afraid." There was a long silence between them, and Caleb could feel the weight of her uncertainty. She had been through so much, seen so much, that it was hard to imagine how anyone, especially a human like him, could ever reach her heart. But Caleb wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not after everything they had been through together. Finally, Scifi stood up, stretching her long, powerful limbs. The firelight flickered in her eyes as she looked down at him. "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice quieter than before, more contemplative. "Maybe I've been running from things for too long. Maybe I don't need to do it alone." Caleb felt a surge of hope. He stood up too, standing a little taller now. "I'm here, Scifi. I'm not going anywhere." For a brief moment, Scifi's gaze softened. She didn't say anything, but there was a change in the air, something subtle, something that Caleb couldn't fully understand. Maybe it was a crack in the wall she had built around herself, or maybe it was just a moment of weakness. But whatever it was, Caleb knew it meant something. Scifi turned away, her back to him as she gazed into the distance. "We'll see," she murmured, though her voice lacked its usual bite. Caleb didn't push her. He understood that trust wasn't something that could be forced. It was something that had to be earned, piece by piece, day by day. And he was willing to keep earning it. The days that followed felt like a quiet calm before a storm. Caleb and Scifi continued their journey through the unforgiving terrain of the alien planet. Caleb had earned Scifi's trust, or at least a small part of it, and each day seemed to bring them closer to understanding one another. They had shared moments of peace, moments when Caleb could almost believe that Scifi might finally let go of the past and allow herself to be human again. But, as Caleb quickly learned, peace was never something Scifi could hold on to for long. The harshness of her world, the darkness that had followed her through every battle, never left her. And soon enough, the calm that had settled between them was shattered. It happened on the third night after their conversation by the fire. They had camped on the edge of a dense forest, the sound of strange creatures echoing in the distance. Scifi had warned Caleb that the jungle was filled with danger, but it wasn't just the creatures of the wild they needed to worry about. Other bounty hunters roamed these parts, drawn to Scifi's reputation, always eager to challenge her and claim her title as the deadliest hunter in the galaxy. It was late in the night when Caleb woke to the sound of rustling in the shadows. His heart leaped into his throat as he quickly reached for the blaster at his side. But before he could make a move, Scifi's voice came to him, calm and quiet, as always. "Stay down," she whispered, her voice carrying a hint of something darker than usual. She was already standing, her silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. Caleb froze. He could feel her tension, the way she had instantly become alert to the sounds around them. She had been preparing for this, he realized. This was her world, where danger lurked at every corner. "They're here," Scifi said softly, her eyes scanning the darkness. "They're always watching." Before Caleb could ask who they were, a group of figures emerged from the shadows. They moved swiftly, silent as ghosts, their weapons drawn and ready. There were 4 of them, all clad in dark armor. Caleb recognized their type instantly, bounty hunters. Scifi's reputation had attracted them once again. He could feel the air grow thick with tension. Scifi didn't even flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes locked on the group, her posture commanding. Caleb, standing behind her, realized how much of a hunter she truly was. This wasn't a battle of strength. It was a battle of will, of dominance, and Scifi had the upper hand. The leader of the group, a tall, heavily armored alien with glowing red eyes, stepped forward. "Scifi," he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "We've been following you for days. You can't hide forever." Scifi's lips curled into a faint smirk. "I'm not hiding. You're just too slow to catch me." The alien leader scowled, his eyes flicking toward Caleb. "I see you've brought a human this time. How quaint." He stepped closer to Caleb, eyeing him with amusement. "Do you think you can survive here? In this world? You're nothing but prey, human." Caleb felt a surge of anger, but he held it back. This wasn't his fight. He was just here to stay alive, to keep moving forward. Still, he couldn't help but feel protective of Scifi. This was her battle, but he wasn't about to just stand by and do nothing. "You should leave now," Scifi said, her voice low and dangerous. "Or I'll make you." The bounty hunters laughed. "You're one to talk, Scifi," the leader sneered. "You're not the same anymore. Weak. Soft." Scifi's expression hardened. You don't know anything about me. The leader smirked. We'll see. Let's see if the rumors are true. You're not invincible. You can bleed. The moment the leader gave the signal, the hunters moved. The air exploded with sound as blasters fired, and Scifi reacted with deadly precision. She ducked, spun, and with one swift motion, she disarmed the closest hunter. Caleb watched in awe as she moved, like a shadow, like a force of nature. He quickly realized that this was Scifi's element. She was a predator, born for this life. She didn't hesitate, didn't show fear. She was calm in the face of danger, moving with purpose as she took down her attackers one by one. Caleb, caught up in the chaos, grabbed his blaster and fired at the remaining 2 bounty hunters, taking them by surprise. His aim wasn't perfect, but his shots were enough to distract them long enough for Scifi to finish them off. With a final move, she took down the last one with a swift strike to his chest. The silence that followed was deafening. Scifi stood over the fallen hunters, her breath steady, her face unreadable. Caleb, still shaking from the fight, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had taken control of the situation with such ease. It was almost as if she had done this 1,000 times before. You didn't have to do that, Caleb said, his voice still trembling. Scifi turned to face him, her eyes cold and calculating. I did what I had to do. These are my enemies. They've been hunting me for years. And they'll keep coming as long as they think they can take me down. Caleb felt a knot form in his stomach. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want you to get involved, Scifi said, her voice quieter now, but still firm. This is my fight, not yours. But now you've seen it for yourself. Caleb nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Scifi had been carrying this burden alone for so long. She had no choice but to fight, to survive. And now she had let him into her world of danger and survival. Are you okay? Caleb asked, concern in his voice. Scifi didn't answer immediately. She simply turned her gaze back to the stars, her posture stiff but resolute. I will be, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb knew then that she wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something else, for trust, for companionship, for a future she didn't think she could have. And for the first time, he realized that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that they could face it together. The night after the battle was a quiet one. The bounty hunters were defeated, their bodies left in the clearing where they had fallen. The air was thick with the aftermath of the fight, dust, sweat, and the heavy silence that only comes after a battle is won. Scifi and Caleb stood together, a few paces apart, the weight of the day settling between them like a heavy fog. Scifi was the first to break the silence. She moved with the same calm, controlled grace that Caleb had come to expect from her. It was as if the chaos of the fight hadn't touched her at all. She had been in far worse situations, and yet she remained the same, steady, composed. You did well, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. For a human. Caleb couldn't help but smile at the compliment. He had heard it before, but hearing it from Scifi felt different. She didn't give praise easily, and when she did, it meant something. I had a good teacher, Caleb replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still rushing through him. Scifi didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared into the distance, her eyes scanning the horizon. Caleb followed her gaze, seeing nothing but the endless stretch of wilderness that surrounded them. The planet, cold and indifferent, seemed to stretch on forever. Why didn't you tell me about them? Caleb asked, breaking the silence once more. The hunters, I mean. I had no idea this was going to happen. Scifi turned to face him, her expression unreadable. I didn't want you to get involved, she said simply. This is my fight, not yours. You shouldn't have to deal with this because of me. But I'm already involved, Caleb replied. I've seen what it takes to survive out here, and I'm not going to leave you alone to face this. If they're after you, they're after me too. And I'm not going anywhere. Scifi's eyes softened, just a little. She hadn't expected Caleb to say that. She had always been alone, always believed that the only person she could rely on was herself. The idea of trusting someone else, especially a human, was a foreign concept. But there was something about Caleb that was different. He wasn't like the others. He didn't see her as a weapon or a tool to be used. He saw her for who she really was. "I told you I wasn't the same," Scifi said, her voice quiet. "I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to let someone in." Caleb took a step closer, his gaze steady and calm. "You don't have to do it alone anymore, Scifi. You've been carrying this burden for too long. You don't have to carry it by yourself." She looked at him, her gaze piercing, as if searching for any sign of doubt. But Caleb's eyes were unwavering. He was serious. He wasn't just saying the words, he meant them. Scifi took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. She had always believed that she was destined to fight alone. She had built her entire life around that idea. But now, with Caleb standing before her, offering something she had never thought she could have, she was starting to see things differently. "You don't understand," she said, her voice quieter now. "I can't just forget everything I've done. I've killed so many, Caleb. I've done things I can't take back. I don't know how to stop being the hunter." Caleb reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't much, just a simple gesture, but it felt like everything. "You're not just a hunter, Scifi. You're a person. You've made mistakes, but that doesn't define you. What matters now is what you choose to do next." Her eyes flickered with something Caleb couldn't quite place. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. For the first time, she seemed vulnerable, as if the walls she had so carefully built were starting to crack. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can change." "You don't have to change all at once," Caleb said gently. "It's about taking one step at a time. You don't have to do everything on your own. You have me, and I'll be here with you, every step of the way." Scifi stared at him for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always believed that she had to fight alone, that no one could ever understand her, let alone stand beside her. But now, with Caleb's steady presence beside her, the idea of sharing her burden didn't seem so impossible. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you care so much?" Caleb smiled softly, his eyes warm with sincerity. "Because I see you, Scifi. I see the person behind a legend. I see the strength you have, not just in your battles, but in your heart. You're more than just the hunter of the galaxy. You're someone I want to fight for." Scifi's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever seen her like Caleb did. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this after all. She looked down, her eyes briefly closing as she processed everything Caleb had said. When she looked up again, there was a softness in her eyes that Caleb had never seen before. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. "Okay," she said softly, her voice steady. "Let's see where this goes. Together." Caleb's smile widened, his heart swelling with relief. He had been patient, had waited for her to come to this decision on her own. And now, standing beside her, he felt like they were ready for whatever came next. Together. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of understanding between Caleb and Scifi. Though the road ahead was still filled with challenges, both knew they had crossed an important threshold. No longer was Scifi the cold, untouchable hunter of legends, and Caleb wasn't just a human caught in her world of danger. They were partners now, bound by a shared journey, facing the universe together. The bounty hunters had been just the beginning. Even after their defeat, Scifi knew that more would come. The galaxy was vast, and as long as her name was known, there would always be those who sought to challenge her. But with Caleb by her side, things felt different. She no longer felt like a lone warrior, always fighting to survive. She had someone who cared about her, someone who didn't just want her for her skills, but for the person she truly was. Caleb, for his part, had been amazed at the woman Scifi was becoming. Her tough exterior hadn't melted away completely. She was still the formidable hunter who could defeat anyone in her path. But now there was something else there, something soft that Caleb had come to admire. She had started to open up, started to trust him more. She didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. One evening, as the two sat together by the fire, Scifi broke the silence. It wasn't often that she spoke openly about her past, but tonight felt different. Caleb had become someone she could share her thoughts with, someone who understood the weight of her life without judging her for it. I used to think I was better off alone, Scifi began, her voice steady but soft. I told myself that I could never trust anyone, that I didn't need anyone. But when I see you, when I see the way you look at me, like I'm not just some weapon, it makes me wonder if I was wrong. Caleb didn't say anything at first. He just listened, letting her words settle between them. He had always known that Scifi carried more than just the weight of her reputation. She carried years of solitude, of pain, of choices made in the heat of battle. But now, with each passing day, he saw more of who she really was, and he couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come together. You were never meant to be alone, Scifi, Caleb said, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. I believe in you, in us, and I'll be here for as long as you'll let me. She looked at him then, her expression unreadable. It wasn't the first time he had told her that he was there for her, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, it felt like something had shifted between them, like the bond they shared had deepened. For the first time, Scifi allowed herself to truly believe that Caleb wasn't going anywhere. He had proven it over and over, and now she was ready to accept that truth. I don't know if I deserve you, Caleb, she said quietly, looking away from him. I've done things, terrible things. I've hurt so many. I don't know how to make up for all of it. Caleb reached out and gently took her hand in his. You don't have to make up for anything. You're not your past, Scifi. You're who you choose to be now. And I choose you. The sincerity in his words struck her deeply. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She just held onto his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch, the steady beat of his heart. It was something she had never allowed herself to experience before. Connection, vulnerability, trust. Scifi took a deep breath, then looked at Caleb with a small smile. I think I'm starting to understand, she said softly. I think I can be something more than just the hunter of the galaxy. Caleb smiled back, his heart swelling with hope. I know you can. The next few days were filled with a quiet peace that Caleb had never expected. They continued to travel together, facing whatever came their way with a new sense of unity. Though Scifi remained the fierce warrior she had always been, there was now a lightness to her steps, a softness in her eyes when she looked at Caleb. They encountered more dangers, of course. This was the galaxy, after all. But now they faced them together, side by side. When enemies came at them, they fought with a new kind of strength, a strength that came not from just their weapons, but from the bond they had built. Caleb wasn't just her partner in battle. He was her partner in life. And she had come to realize that, perhaps for the first time, that was something worth fighting for. As the days passed, Scifi found herself letting go of the past a little more each day. She wasn't afraid to show Caleb her true self anymore, to allow herself to be seen for who she was, not just for what she could do. And Caleb, he was there, every step of the way, showing her that she didn't have to be alone, that she didn't have to be the hunter anymore. She could be Scifi, the person, not the legend. One evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, Scifi looked at Caleb with something resembling wonder in her eyes. It wasn't just the way he had changed her world. It was the way he had made her believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future for them both. A future that didn't have to be shaped by bloodshed and loneliness, but by the love and trust they had found in one another. I never thought I could feel this way, Scifi said, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb smiled, his heart full. "I think we're just getting started." Saileri nodded, her hand finding his once more. For the first time, in a long while, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope.